Wade, we are off. We are rolling, much like my Detroit Tigers. The OUA season continues to roll. We have a hell of a week coming up. The marquee matchup this week is the Queens Gaels taking on the Western Mustangs. We know this rivalry runs deep.
Western is going to be rocking. Homecoming game. They're going to be fired up. 1 p.m. The crowd's going to be very loud, very
Mhm.
packed. Uh, Queen's going to be probably the most hostile environment that they're going to play in this entire year.
No, I agree. I agree. This is we know what it's like to go to London and have to play Western and their home field. It is, it's called a home field advantage for a reason, and you really feel it when you are in London, Ontario, and there is purple and silver freaking everywhere you look, and that stadium is loud and they're chanting against you. We know what the Western Mustangs are. We know what the environment is, but I don't think this is something that Queens is unprepared for. I don't think this is something that Queens is going to be, not ready for. Queens, to me, as we continue to kind of go on through the season, as we talk about these two teams here, queuing up this matchup, Queens to me has been a team that started a little bit slow, built and built and built, and now it looks like they're kind of getting hot and clicking at the right time. They're coming off a 24-18 win against a really damn good Guelph Griffins football team, and Queens themselves played lights out football in that one, if I may say. Their defense and special teams unit, I think this year is really the driving force of this Gales team. And Wade, what travels well? Defenses and run games, baby. And what does Queens have? Jared Cheshire, and a hell of a defense.
Now, Connor, I mean, we know that Queens' strength lies in their front four, and that
Mhm.
being Johnson, Van, Darian, Silas Hubert. Like they've got a ton of guys that go across that front four, even the guys that rotate in with them on their dress roster that are very solid. But as you said off the hop, we know what or we know what Western is. We also know what Queens is, and that's a team that's going to die on the hill of trying to run the ball and kind of pick their way down the field with some soft zones and work around it. The tough thing I think Queens is going to run into is athletically outside the box, can they match it? And I know with Jackson Finley back there, he kind of makes up for a lot of mistakes, but uh, they have such athletic defensive backs, and I know Queens has some talented guys on the outside like Nico Cuomo, but
Mhm.
uh, can they match athletically to have those breakaway plays like we've seen a Western do with a guy like Mo Jamal on the outside who seems to outpace everyone around him on the offensive side of the ball?
Absolutely, absolutely. The skill, the talent, the abilities of the receiving unit of the Western Mustangs is gonna put Queens to the test. But Queens to combat this, to counteract this, they have some really damn good DBs in their own right. I mean, led by a guy like Keegan Vanek, they can make you pay if you make bad decisions with the football. Just last week, we saw them hold the two-headed monster of Marshall McCray and Tristan Aboud to just 259 through the air. They were 19 of 32. So we know that they're DBs. We know that the back end of this Queens defense is going to be aggressive, and they're gonna try to look to lock down guys like Mo Jamal and guys like Seth Robertson. Where I'm really looking at with this Queens defense is what are they going to do with the rushing attack of the Western Mustangs? We know that their bread and butter is running the football, and we know that it's not just Keon Edwards, it's not just K5 that can do this. They have Keanu Yazbek and a whole slew of other running backs in the backfield that run the ball really, really well. And we were looking to see what they were going to do against this Guelph Griffins offense, this multifaceted run game of the Guelph Griffins. And I think Queens boxed that up really, really well. I mean, aside from, we talked about this on the recap too, right? Like aside from a 99-yard Donovan Malloy touchdown scamper, you're held to 78 yards on the ground.
Yeah,
So
and
I'm looking to see how Queens is going to attack Western's rushing game, because I think if you can take away Keon and the crew, they might find some success again.
I think what it's going to come down to with them is as diverse as they can be and what fronts they give teams. I think this week's going to see a lot of 40 fronts, those four down linemen like we talked about off the hop. Maybe they get an extra linebacker up in some mug fronts, or if they add a true five-man line. But Uh, Obviously, in first down, you're expecting a lot of run action where they're going to take those either vertical shots down the sidelines or deep crossers over the middle, unless they're handing the ball off. And first and foremost for Queens will be to have a repeat performance outside of that 99-yard rush. They want to establish that you are not moving the ball with that run game on this defense. And uh, from there, I think 2nd and 8+, you're going to see them rotate into their 30 front, go with just Darian in the middle, Van on one edge, Silas on the other edge, and really force Evan Hillock to make some tight window throws and really test that Western passing game to be a bit more complex, right? Like you have the two halfbacks in Miller Melanson and Keegan Vanek that are going to
Mhm.
make the plays when given a chance. So using a lot of cut coverage, cut and carry rules at the corners, and sitting in that 3-man shell might be the answer on 2nd and long. But I know they're going to sell out to
Mhm.
get themselves in those 8+ yardage situations.
Absolutely, and I think, looking back a couple weeks now on this one, I think Laurier really gave us the blueprint of how to handle these Western Mustangs. It was a 43-28 win,
Yeah,
just 2 weeks ago
jump
for
out
Laurier,
early and
right?
kind of eliminate the run game. But the biggest thing Loria did in that game, Connor, early was get up in the turnover battle, get that
Yes.
+1 in that column. And as much as Queens preaches ball security in training camp, they also preach takeaways in training
Mhm.
camp. And I think when it comes down to it, this game relies on Queens' defense uh, making that stand, being the unit that a couple years ago in the Vanier Cup, it was all K5 in the snow. How do
Mhm.
we now say, look, you guys may have won that one, but we're going to aim to send you home with a second loss in your homecoming crowd, as tough as it's going to be. Uh, that's their number one mission. And I'm excited to see
Mhm.
how they approach it. And certainly how Western, coming off of that loss, they had the bye week, Connor, right? Like
Yeah.
they did not play last week. They're going to be rested. They're
Mhm.
going to be pissed off because all of last week they probably crushed each other at practice, and then this week
Yeah.
they started looking at Queens. So expect some wrinkles from Western, but expect a really polished, pissed off Mustang team.
Hit the nail on the head. Wait, that was the point that I wanted to make. They're coming off this loss to Laurier, obviously not a loss that they wanted to suffer. And you're right, they've had a week off to kind of fester and stew and hit the crap out of each other in practice going into this one. So homecoming crowd, a pretty pissed off Western Mustangs team, like you're saying. I think this is going to be a tall order for the Queens Gaels, but I'm looking forward to some exciting football in Southern Ontario. I think this is going to be some hard nosed football, and I think we're going to have a bit of a battle on our hands. Now, we got to move on. I think because we could talk about the marquee matchup for the rest of this episode. If we really wanted to, we could get into nitty gritties. We could talk about pretty much all three phases and then some of this game. But we got to move on. Got to limit ourselves. Got to show some self control here. So let's talk about the Laurier Golden Hawks taking on the Ottawa GGs. Laurier coming off a 39-23 win in the Battle of Waterloo. Ottawa looking to bounce back after a last second defeat to the Windsor Lancers. Literally last play for Ottawa in that one.
Connor, the Ottawa GGs have played 5 games. For 5 games in a row, it has been a very simple formula. Give the ball to Charles
I think I know where
Fastley.
you're going with this one.
It's a broken record, but it comes out every week.
Yeah.
Uh,
He's the
Obviously,
leading rusher in the country for a reason, right? Like,
Panda game is next week.
probably
You
for sure.
need to have these guys raring to go next week, but you can't afford to fall further behind the 8 ball here. If you drop to 2-4, Connor, and say
Yeah.
Carleton goes to 2-4, next week's Panda game could be the deciding factor in who hosts a home playoff game or who makes the playoffs outright at the end of the season. I know McMaster is going to start surging. I know that Guelph is going to keep winning. Western Queens, Windsor Laurier, they're not going anywhere. So for Ottawa, do you want to be the 7th seed, or do you want to have a chance at maybe hosting a game or even by some stretch going to play a more favorable matchup seating wise. I think this game's everything for them. And I think we see Josh Jansen at
Me too.
quarterback this week. Uh, but for Laurier, a sloppy game last week, they're going to be on the ball this week. I don't think this is going to be a week where they kind of relax. This is going to be all out from the start
Mhm.
against the GGs.
Yeah, we talked about it, and this was kind of the theme of the recap episode, right? Like even when we moved into the rest of the nation, we talked about throughout U Sports, the theme really was good teams winning ugly, and that was Laurier last week a little bit. Like you said, they started a little bit sloppy coming out of the gate in that game. I highly doubt we see that 2 weeks in a row from the Laurier Golden Hawks. And right now they're sitting as the number one seed, not only in this conference, but in the nation. So Ottawa does have a tough task ahead of them. But to circle back to this Windsor game for Ottawa, they found some success. They brought in Josh Jansen, like you said. They found some success. They started showing some offensive diversity. I mean, Charles Asselin goes for 83-1, but then they have some receivers, two receivers, 6 catches, 70 yards. They had another receiver up over 50. So Josh Jansen was slinging the ball around the park, and I think that the move to Josh Jansen paired with the aggressiveness and how they like to operate their offense through Charles Astley. I think that they've kind of found the formula that's going to work for them. Unfortunately, it started clicking just a little bit too late in that Windsor game last week. But if they can take that and they can roll that into this week one, if they can continue this not as a quarter one, but as a quarter five, if you know what I'm trying to say here, like if you can come into this with all of this momentum of the Windsor game, with this offense that you started kind of finding out and clicking in this Windsor game, I do think that they could potentially come in and give Laurier some issues because on the back end of this defense, I mean, both of the Cumberbatches are super talented ball players. We know what they have on the back end with guys like Kevin McTomb and Tolu Ahmed.
Denny
So
Ferdinand as well.
Denny
Like the
Ferdinand,
five across is
they have some
lights out, like you
damn good
said.
DBs.
I think the big thing with Ottawa's offense, Connor, and this is a really bad road spot for them, going all the way to Windsor, home, and now all the way to Kitchener Waterloo to play Laurier.
Hmm.
Last road trip of the year, right? You have Panda game next week. You host Toronto the last week this season. Uh, find it in you guys to kind of have that tough long week and go. But what's really missing with Ottawa, and I don't know if this is the week to find it, is a downfield passing game, something vertical. And obviously with guys like Oladejo and Nick Gendron leaving over the last couple of years,
Hmm.
they're missing that guy who can be the, you know what, we need it. Let's throw it down. He's going to make a play, or let's try to force the ball and stretch defense. I don't know if Geist can be that guy. Charles certainly has been the home run hitter of the offense, but we can't rely on the same guy to generate 90% of our offense in a season.
No, I 100% agree, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Ottawa is able to figure out, how they're able to kind of scheme things up. I'm curious to see who's going to be under center in this one. I do expect it to be Josh Jansen, based on what he did when he came into that Windsor game last week. I think you got to kind of roll with the hot hand in this one. Laurier Ottawa though should be a fun one. You're right. It's a tough. That's a brutal road trip for the GGs having to go to Windsor and then turn around and having to go right back. A little bit of a shorter distance, not by much though. You're going to the Kitchener Waterloo region, like you said. Looking forward to this ball game though. Any more points on this one? You want to move on?
I'm ready to talk about the other Ottawa team, Carleton, hosting the York Lions, who have a
Ooh,
stripe
earn their
on the helmet.
stripes. Hell yeah, they
Um,
did.
Connor, if there's a defense that's going to kind of stymie this Elijah Barnes rise and growth that we've seen, it might be this Greg Knox defense. Very tough. But at the same time, he played very well against Western. Uh, I'm excited to see how this one looks. I mean, obviously the styles are very contrasting in York's necessity to run the ball as much, and Carlton just kind of saying, "Well, Elijah's great. Let's ride with the hot hand." I don't know if Lefebvre will be back from the injury that he's been dealing with, but certainly Elijah Barnes has been everything they've hoped as a recruit. I think the future is now with Carlton, and Yeah, they can make a push for the playoffs these last few games, and Coach Corey's certainly going to do that with this one, the Panda, and then Laurier down the stretch.
Mhm.
But this is the game that you have to win if you're going to make that push, and you're going to have to do it now. So I expect a lot of urgency from Coach Corey Grant and the Ravens. And for this York Lions team, how do you handle winning? It's always one thing to handle a loss, but after what was it, 1,807 days without a win, how do your guys respond to that emotional high and the way that you won to now going on the road to Carlton, handling yourselves on the road and not kind of falling flat after that emotional peak?
Yeah, I mean, you can't let the emotional high of that win, and it's an important win, don't get me wrong, but you can't be hungover. You can't have the win hangover after that one going into this Carlton game. And the thing that I'm really going to be looking forward in this one with York specifically is their defense.
Hmm.
Yes, they won that game. It was a 19-17 game. It was a tight game, but they gave up almost 400 yards of total offense, and most of that was given up through the air. They gave up 329 yards through the air. O'Donoghue went 28 of 41, or Toronto's offense went 28 of 41 passing in this one. And they're going into a game against a guy like Elijah Barnes, like you were just talking about. He's been phenomenal through this season. I think, like you said a couple weeks ago, he's one of the biggest stories this season in the OUA with his play, with his consistency, his decision making, what he does with the ball, how he operates that Carlton offense, the things he's doing in the National Capital Region right now. This is a damn talented quarterback, and you just gave up 330 yards to O'Donoghue, who let's be honest, he's a phenomenal rookie quarterback in this league right now. But you're going into a game against Elijah Barnes, who can dissect defenses. He's an absolute surgeon out there. He's very cerebral, smart with the football, puts it into positions of success for his wide receivers to go up and make plays. So I'm going to be really looking at the pass defense of the York Lions in this one, as well as the run defense. I know they held Toronto to 63
You know,
yards
Toronto hasn't ran the
rushing.
ball. Toronto hasn't
That's
ran the
what I
ball
mean.
since
That's what
in
I'm
a
looking at.
month, literally in a month.
And you're going up against a Carlton Ravens team who's not afraid to run the ball. They will run
Hmm.
the ball, and they're going to run the ball hard. So I'm really going to keep my eyes on this York Lions defense. We know they can hit the explosive plays with guys like Avante McCoy. I would like to see, a little bit more, offensive production. They only went for 266 in the win, but hey, a win's a win. Shout out to York for that one. But I'm gonna have my eyes on their defense in this one.
All right, Guelph Waterloo quickly. Guelph rebounding. Obviously, I expect them to come out with a flamethrower of an offense this week.
Yeah.
It's a get right game for Guelph. Waterloo, I think will try to run the ball, but like Queens found out, it's not always as easy as it looks going against the Guelph three-man front. Uh, I anything on that one before we move to Windsor Toronto?
Yeah, just a couple quick points for Waterloo on this one. I think they had a tough game against Laurier Golden Hawks in that Battle of Waterloo, but they still put up over 400 yards or almost 400 yards of total offense in this one. I thought that Nick Orr did some really good things in this one, but like we were talking about with the GGs and Charles Aslan being the guy, being the home run hitter, I think Anthony Miller is much of the same, and Quentin Springer too is much of the same for these Waterloo Warriors. So how are you going to diversify your offense in this one? How are you going to keep things interesting? How are you going to keep the Guelph Griffins defense guessing? Because we know they're a darn talented defense. They can get after the quarterbacks. They can get in the backfield and kind of ruin your day. So what are you going to do to keep them guessing, keep them on their toes, keep them honest is what I want to see out of Waterloo in this one, because I do think they have really talented players on the offensive side of the ball in this one. But they're going up against one of the better defenses in this conference.
And finally, the Windsor Lancers hosting the Toronto Varsity Blues. Windsor kind of having a nice extended home stretch here with two games two games in a row, and then obviously uh, one more home game against Guelph in a few weeks. But going against Toronto after the loss last week, I think Windsor's going to try and test this Toronto run defense. I think defense coordinator Bob Mullen's done a great job all year with Toronto and kind of scheming around how teams are going to attack them. And I want to say making teams play left-handed, right? Like we saw Guelph come in with this massive run attack, and then they have to air it out, right? Like they're making teams play kind of against their identity, which is always nice. But without the run game and the offense to complement, I feel like this defense is just getting worn out throughout the year.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, man. I think that's my big takeaway for this one, for the Varsity Blues, and this one is, let's find a ground game. Let's put the ball in the hands of a running back. Let's not make Caleb Donahue go out there and try to win games solely with his arms, and then be your lone rusher or your leading rusher. We saw this a few years ago with Clay, right? Like that worked until it didn't. And when it didn't,
Mhm.
it really didn't. So I would like to see, much like I was talking about with Waterloo a little bit, I would like to see Toronto diversify their offense. I would like to see them put the ball on the ground. I would like to see them find success on the ground. Now, this might not be the week to do it. This is a darn tough Windsor Lancers front seven.
Yeah.
They can get the backfield. They can mix things up. Um, but I would like to see Toronto find some success on the ground.
I uh I think that's it for this week though. Here in the OUA, we got five stellar games, three at 1 o'clock, and then we got the stagger for the last two throughout the day. Enjoy all the games live and on demand at OUA.tv. Free to sign up, free to watch, free to enjoy. I mean, if you're in the stadiums, especially in London, go get your tickets. That one's going to be a show and a half, but uh, excited to see it. We'll bring it back the next week for our recap. Stay tuned wherever you get your podcast if you guys want to catch the rest of our discussion leading into this upcoming week of U Sports football. But as always, enjoy the football. We'll talk to you next week.